Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of A Contagious Smile. We have Nicole with us today, and Nicole is also another warrior special needs mom who has dedicated her life to help shining a light in the darkest parts of the human condition. She is a fighter, to say the least, as all special needs moms are, but she goes above and beyond and does a lot of other things that you guys are just going to love to hear about. She is also worked with a dozen international campaigns and had a direct impact on the release of the what was the Christians around the globe?
Yeah, Christians or religious minorities in their arena, region rather.
And you have two children.
Yeah.
We're going to hear the story about them. And I cannot thank you enough for finding time as a mom and everything that you're doing to be with us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Of course. So in 2020, you had your daughter and she was in distress. What happened?
Yeah. So I already had another daughter that was nearly 5, and we had a journey like no other, just getting her to that point of the birthing process. But yes, I had a 27-hour labor, so prolonged rupture with a prolapse cord, which is when the cord comes out in advance of the baby and cuts off oxygen flow. From the point of discovery of the prolapse cord to having her forcibly removed from me was about 10 to 15 minutes. So she was born not breathing, resuscitated, and then a whole series of events that sort of unfolded in which we realized, something bad has come of that event. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How long did she have to stay in the NICU?
A month. What allowed us to leave was the insertion of a gastric tube. One of the big symptoms she had was the inability to self-feed, suck, swallow, breathe coordination wasn't there, aspirating like crazy. And so we ended up only having to stay there for a month. We were very grateful for that in the sense that there was a means to get us back into our own home environment. But there was a lot of complications that come with home environment too.
There are.
Yeah.
There are. She has a G tube or a GJ tube?
G tube.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So though I say all the time that those NICU walls hear more prayers.
Oh, I know.
That is
actually, yeah, I we had a lot of things obviously leading up, just personally, a lot of family members that had lost their children and babies in that realm of our season of our life. So I remember my husband and I, this is like the height of height of COVID. So we were barred from being there together. There was a lot of restrictions, like everything was being shut down. So one of the big things that my husband and I, we finally were able to start switching out at some point. So I was allowed to be there. And then after a certain period of time, we were allowed to switch out. And then my husband would come for a period of time. And we just spent time, just walking the halls and praying for those children and praying blessings, because there was this weird sense of reality that our other friends didn't get to bring their children home, that there was an ability to be a blessing to those children, even just through our prayers and just presence there as we were going through a difficult time too. That we were just incredibly grateful to even just be there, because the alternative was that she was dead and we weren't able to have that experience and to fight for her. So yeah, there's just odd points in everyone's journey that you realize you're like competing gratitude, where you're just deeply hurt that you have to go through this, but you're also deeply grateful because there's an alternative out there too. So
right. And I think that as special needs mom, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think we have a totally different bond with our kid than
I know.
Because we experience things that the soccer moms don't experience at all, and vice versa. But like, we don't take anything for granted at all.
I have a good friend. His daughter has a cerebral palsy like my daughter. And he said it really well. He goes, our highs are really high. Our lows are really, really low, but our highs are really, really high. And there's this beautiful sense of balance that comes from that, again, I already had a daughter that was just very atypical, and experiences with her sort of were this awareness of the other side of that. That, yeah, it was just that advocacy, that purpose that motherhood gives, but special needs motherhood is just so different. It's just so different.
How is your oldest daughter with your youngest?
Oh, really? Just such a beautiful advocate. We did experience secondary infertility, so I had actually gone through a season of the infertility and then miscarriages.
Sorry.
And that path too sort of almost like set the stage for my youngest daughter. She had prayed for a sibling. She had just really been invested in that path, that once she came, it was like a fulfillment of like that build up, that purpose that she had over those 3 years where we were sort of battling out that part of our journey.
What's the
So
age
now
difference between them?
5.
Oh, how
Mhm.
sweet. Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so they're
you went
great.
through an unthinkable amount of pain for those 3 years, right?
Yes, actually, the odd thing I had, it was actually hormone induced. And I know this now. I did not know that then, but I experienced this infection that caused an immense amount of pain. The only way I can liken it is like being doused in gasoline and set on fire all the time. I was like that 24/7. And just desperate for solutions, mind-bending pain all the time without any answer as to why or how to resolve it. So, of course, obviously that puts you into, it's tied to my fertility. So obviously I can't have kids, but then I was down this like health path that I was finding solutions, but it was taking a long time. So when I was starting to improve that, then would I get pregnant, but then I would lose the baby because the infection was still there. And so when I finally got pregnant with Cosette, my youngest daughter, that infection was still there. So it was very challenging pregnancy because we were fearful that, of course we would lose her too, just like the other babies I had lost. But man, she stuck in there,
You said her name was Cassette. I've never heard that. It's gorgeous.
Cosette, yeah, it means first use of the name was victorious, and then little thing is the other use. So we picked it because it meant victorious little thing. She was going to be victorious, and she has. It's a beautiful name for her.
It's gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. I've just never heard that name before. It's amazing. So now, how is she?
Oh man, you told me a bit about your little one's journey too, just defying all odds. She's done the same. Can't tell you how many times we've heard, I'm looking at your child on the MRI and I'm looking at your child in front of me and they're not the same person.
Right.
And just, she's such a fighter. She's so determined. She's just pushes through all discomfort to tackle the next challenge. So right now she'll be 3 on Tuesday. And she is still nonverbal and she is still non-mobile in the sense that she cannot walk unsupported. So she's this tiny little cute, precious little thing walking around in a walker if she's in public. So, and then she speaks ASL to communicate. And she's adapted to survive, as they say,
I was going to ask if you're doing ASL with her.
Yeah, her cognitive capabilities are actually above average. And that's caused its own level of challenges early on. Her level of ability to communicate didn't match her level of ability to comprehend and desire to communicate. So lots and lots of screaming. We had a period where it was just like 24/7. If she was awake, she was screaming. And we've gotten to a point where it's her physical capabilities allowing for, she had really closed hands early on where she couldn't even open her hands. So now that she can express with her hands, and she's able to recognize that she can communicate. So better. Yeah.
Good for her.
Actually, Yeah. And actually, can I pause real quick in the recording? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
My plug apparently.
Well, it sounds like she's absolutely resilient, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And so where is she learning her ASL?
This gal right here.
Are you
I
fluent in ASL?
No, it's I say it's like we're learning it together. Recently, and I know you know this, having gone through this process yourself, you had your own journey of realization of the resources, and like, her particular milestones are always sort of like changing, and that means you
Right.
have a new challenge to sort of overcome. And just recently, we're getting access to those resources that would allow us to sort of probably advance my skills in the ASL area probably quicker than me just we go to the grocery store or go to a store and I just get my ASL app out and I'm like, hey, frog, I'm learning vocabulary along the way with her. But I'm hoping to get into a full ASL class for her sake.
I have a master's in design.
Oh,
And
oh,
I actually not only teach the parents with the child, but I also teach the children. And I help bridge that
that's
gap of
nice.
frustration.
Yes.
And
Well, hey, I'm like super excited about that.
I started teaching my child because, she was inaudible. And I wanted to make things as easy as possible on her.
Mhm.
And so, now even with the kids, I go in and I see the parents and they're frustrated, Nicole, and they're not frustrated at their child. They're frustrated at the fact that our society and the medical system doesn't provide that to them to help. And I've said so
Yeah.
long, even if it's temporary, like they've had they've been
Yes.
intubated for whatever reason, let's teach like 10 basic signs to them.
Well, and
Help, potty,
yeah.
hungry, just in the interim. But
Yeah, and I feel like they're pushing the augmented on
Qualcomm
us,
devices.
which is fine, but her cognitive capabilities are
It'll frustrate her
here.
more.
It's gonna frustrate her, and I know in the long term she'll likely speak, but it's gonna be a while.
That's going
And
to hinder her from trying. And
yes,
see, what I do is I make it fun and we make
oh,
silliness, and silliness makes
oh,
fun. And then they want to learn and then they want to do more. And, we make such a fun game out of it when we're teaching. And then I work with you and I work with them and,
oh,
and
good.
she's at the perfect age. And then you work together. And sometimes I'll say, oh, well, let me work with just her. And I'll say, I'm going to tell you a secret. And it's so exciting and fun. And then I'll say,
Yeah,
okay, let's bring your mom in and show her what you learned. And then I already tell you in advance to act like, well, what are you saying? What are you saying? And it makes her all
yeah.
excited and giddy because she's got a secret.
Oh,
And it
yeah,
bonds you guys even more
yeah.
so than, just that textbook of, okay, well, here's your ABC,
Easy, yeah. I
and
know.
you need to have fun with it. And then she looks at it like it's a game, it's a toy, it's fun. And then she wants to do it more.
Yeah, and it's one of these things. It's sort of a balance for us that for one, the resources that we have at our disposal are ones in which they're sort of laid in front of you, but nobody does anything with them. Like it's put in my lap to try to juggle every piece of paperwork and balance of her benefits. And I actually she's been in a few commercials for our disability department here in our state. So and I know the head of that, the commissioner. And so they bring her in, so I've got all these people at my disposal and they're like, hey, here's a resource. I was like, the problem with that is that I love that we have these resources and thank you for letting me know about them. But now I have to solve every problem. Now I have to go and seek out the right one and vet every single one
And
of
we
those
don't have
benefits.
that time.
And we don't have the time for that. And so for me, it's like, and I feel that it's really important for her too. Here I am, I'm a hearing person. I've had very minimal experience with ASL and the deaf community. We do have resources for the deaf community, and because she's nonverbal, she does actually qualify for them, even though she is a hearing person. But again, I have to pursue those avenues. I have to figure out, like learn a whole new culture that quickly.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm like, my learning curve has been so high since the moment that she came out of me. I was aware of cerebral palsy, but I wasn't aware of the level of complexity of and broad spectrum that CP occupies. For her, the only thing I was really aware of, most anybody that I've ever been exposed to with the CP community had been in a wheelchair, or just a really extreme form of it. And so when I'm hearing it, I'm like, those bells are going off, like this is what's going to be her path. And then you come to realize, actually, CP, there's not a single case on earth that is exactly the same.
Right.
And they say, well, CP it's never going to get worse, but in reality it does, because the brain damage doesn't get worse, but the way that it impacts your body and how the body breaks down, because it's constantly fighting against each other, your muscles and your joints and all these sorts of things. And I had to sort of become aware of individuals with cerebral palsy that more matched Cosette's realm, right? And
Right.
what is her quality of life going to be, in the sense of what are the challenges she's going to face, right? Because I get to have conversations with individuals like, hey, this is what I've gone through, and this is likely something that Cosette will go through in her lifetime, and she may walk and she may talk one day, but her joints likely might be displaced. They might, muscles wear down quicker because they're always pulling against each other. These things that the physicians don't tell you. They're like, she's gonna be great, it's gonna be wonderful. And I'm like, and as I'm like learning and going, actually, no, that she's going to really like walk a path that if I just left it to your path that you're laying out, I don't agree to that.
Right.
Quite frankly, I'm like, no. So we've had to go sort of outside of the purview of the standard,
Right.
and realize, she has sensory issues, and these sensory issues are derived from the brain damage. And, how do those sensory issues actually apply to, her potential to read in the future, or her potential for learning, or her potential to process emotions? Because if she gets excited,
Oh, I can help you so much, Nicole.
like she starts shaking uncontrollably, and her eyes roll back in the back of her head because she's excited. And these have gotten better over time, but like, how do you go about helping a sensory processing disorder when all the resources at your disposal are only the standard OTPT, speech, feeding, and then you have to pay out of pocket for those sorts of things, because it's not possible for you. Like, I'm not the wealthiest person in the world. Like, I've got a bottom to my pocket,
Right.
And then, we're finding out too, like, she has most of her primitive reflexes are still intact. That's impacting her ability to develop. And it's just, all of these things are sort of like thrown at you one after another. And you're sort of, okay, now I'm the advocate for my kid, and the physicians aren't going to tell me really what the solutions can be provided for. So I have to find them, and I have to pursue them, and I have to pay for them, and I have to, so, that department coming in and saying, hey, here's some resources. Aren't you so glad now you know about the resource? I'm like, wouldn't it be great if somebody helped me actually execute this and be part of this process with us, instead of just saying, hey, passing it off to you.
Right. It's like literally, here is a feeding tube. You need to change hers every month. Good luck. And there's no instruction.
Oh my gosh. Hers, I'll just tell you that story. That was nuts. So I'm not medically inclined at all. And I know that you probably went through this too. You're sitting in NICU. You never expected yourself to be here, right? And I just had massive surgery because I had a C-section.
Me too.
I didn't have an epidural, so I had been put under anesthesia. Cosette was not waking up, so I was afraid of giving narcotics through my breast milk. So I stopped all pain medications. So in the height of COVID, I had to go into NICU, in which high level NICU doesn't have a bed or a place to sit,
Right.
without pain medication, to sit in a corner in this tiny little room, without any type of support from my family or my husband. Yeah, it was really just this surreal moment in which you aren't really sure how to handle that process and walk through it. And I remember at one point, we made the decision to do the G tube. And I'm not medically minded. I know that I did miss a calling. I don't like seeing blood. I feel very strongly about maintaining the integrity of your skin. So the decision to put a G tube was incredibly difficult decision. Also, part of my personality, I'm a fight or flight, so I just automatically go into fight mode, right? So every morning I'm in excruciating pain. But I get up, I curl my hair, I put my makeup on, I put my clothes on, and I would pull the curtain back, and I'm in business now, right? And so I remember this nurse, bless her, I think she was on spectrum, quite frankly, because like things about sort of her personality it made her seem like she kind of missed it, like the social cues, but I remember her getting so excited and telling me all of the ins and outs of like G-tube insertion, and on the inside I'm having a literal panic attack, and I just want her to leave so that I can sob uncontrollably. And I know she was trying to help, but it was not helpful in the least, because I knew that I had to come home. I had to go home with that, and I didn't know how to handle it. And I kept telling my husband, I'm like, you're going to have to be the one to take care of it. I can't do it. I can't see this punctured wound in her abdomen, and I have to be the one to take care of it every day. And, and she's on a machine. So the fear of that machine going out and then her not being able to be fed, and being fed 24/7, like in the middle of the night, going through, changing out the thing, and then having a monitor, and the monitor always going off, and all this distress, like I was saying about the challenges of, we were so grateful to go home. Actually, I wasn't grateful. I wanted to stay. But my husband and my oldest daughter, they couldn't handle it. And, again, like Cosette's sister had never met her this whole time, because again, COVID, they can't come into the hospital environment. So, my oldest was not handling mommy being gone all the time. And my husband was like, we have to accept this as our new normal. And I didn't even like that they changed her to a standard crib in NICU, because that meant we were going to be there for a long time. But my husband's like, well, it means, Nicole, it means she's getting better. I'm like, no, this means we're going to be here for a long time. And then they decorate the windows of the NICU with their names, and it's so sweet, but I didn't want it. I wanted it off, because it meant we were going to be here for a long time. It was just like these weird moments of, I'm supposed to be grateful for this because she's alive and it's sweet and it's beautiful, and they're trying to make you comfortable and feel at home, but I don't want to feel at home. No, but then it's not my home. And then the idea of like going home was also overwhelming, because now I had to be the one to care for this new medical reality that I didn't want to be in. So when we got home, it's, they say this a lot, I'm sure you've heard it, you're so strong. You're so strong. God picked you for this, obviously, because you're so strong. Like, no, not at all. I do it because if I don't, my daughter dies, period. And in that season of her life, she stopped breathing so many times in a day, 4, 5, 6 times in a day, turned purple, like not breathing, which that's a bit of your story too. So scary. And that's just, and then of course it's COVID and everything shuts down. Nobody can come and help. Nobody gives you meals. Nobody comes over to try to
hold your hand.
Nobody's present with you, and you're supposed to just be okay with that. And now, but you're so strong. You can do this, and you're like,
hush.
And so many times that people try to encourage. And I say this sometimes, the ministry of silence is more impactful than the ministry of words, because you're trying to fill an area in which you don't understand, and you just want to be hugged and be able to cry through the process, because this is really hard. And like, I don't know if you have heard that poem where about giving birth to a special needs child is like planning a trip to one country and then showing up in another one.
Yeah, going to Holland.
Right. Holland
the
versus
flowers.
France. Yeah. And you plan a trip to France, and then they're detoured to Holland, and it's a beautiful place. It's a slower quality of life. It's something to be appreciated. But I had that spoken over me so many times that I was like, someone says that again, I'm going to find a pen and I'm going to thrust it into your jugular. I was like, such a visceral response. Like, don't tell me that again, because it was about, I looked at it like you had to have an opportunity for grieving. Like, this is something you're grieving, the reality that you're in, because you did expect to show up in France, and it is a beautiful place that you've been thrown into, and something that you have to process it. You can't just like arrive there and be like just fine with it, And part of being in this new place is realizing that your life is always going to be in a state of upset, because you're always trying to be the advocate and find the next step in front of you that can provide value to all of your family, not just the child with special needs, but your other children and your spouse, and finding a new normal. That my husband kept saying that we're in a new normal. We're in a new normal. I'm like, I don't want this new normal. So you have to allow yourself, I called it the opportunities for grief will come, and you have to embrace those opportunities, because if you don't embrace them, you would be stuck in the cycle of grief so long that you cannot see what's in front of you and how valuable it is. Because the reality is, she's alive. She's alive.
Right.
And I just wanted to see how beautiful that reality was, and to appreciate it the way I was supposed to. But, early on, it's hard to see it, because you're just stuck in that cycle, and you're so unsure, and you're trying to learn, your child's condition and her unique needs, and, this G-tube world, and the, machines, and COVID had added an extra level of confusion to that.
Yeah.
And even medical supplies really short. Actually, at one point, the whole nation apparently ran out of tubes, like syringes. The desperate like search for them, because I'm like, hello, she cannot eat without these, you people. It's like, does nobody understand the urgency? Because nobody seemed to be urgent about it. It's like, no, she cannot eat without these, So it's just this reality of like realizing that you were on a path that you hadn't set out to be, but darn it, we're going to do the best we can with it, and just be grateful for this beautiful blessing we have.
Right. Like I'm happy, but not happy at the fact that I can tolerate blood and things of that nature, because like she had mandibular distractors, which are metal rods that come out of the back of her skull. And twice a day, you had to
turn it.
Yeah,
right?
You have to crank it, and it like gyrates her jaw to come out. And then I had to do that. And I'm like, I don't want to put my daughter in that pain,
I know.
And then when she had a trach, they're like, oh, if it gets an occlusion, you have only a certain amount of time and she can code, but with it, you have a guaranteed airway. And so you're like, okay. And then you have to be trained on how to take it in and out, how to get a mucus plug out, how to do your tube, how to do all this. And I'm now a single mom, and I have no help and no support. And it's like, oh my God, and I'm like, what if she pulls both out at the same time? What if,
what do you do?
Right. And then you have all of this equipment that has to go with you everywhere you go.
Yes. And I actually, one time I accidentally ripped it out myself, because I was like feeding her, and we try to do nursing, like a nursing active, to like as a way of therapy to get the suck swallow. So I had to pump right before, so I didn't have any milk in there. And then I would fortify the milk, put it into the pump, and then I would, help her nurse. So when I was laying, she had fallen asleep during the process. Her tube was still in. So when I leaned over on her in her crib to put her down in there, I pinned the tube between that and the crib, and it ripped from her abdomen. And then I almost vomited on the floor because I was just like, are you serious? But that was the second time we had lost it. The first time was like, hey, you have to go back into surgical. They'll check it the first time and they'll replace it and just give you kind of well, it came out in non-business hours because as it would, right? So it comes out, I'm with my oldest, out and about having a mommy daughter date.
Yeah.
So of course my husband's like, calls me panicked, like it's come out and it's out of like we can't go to surgical right now. So what are we going to do?
It's just a G tube, but
it's just G-tube.
Then they should be able to place it non-surgically after that.
Yes, you can, but they want the first time for them to like check the site, see if it's healing. It's just, that's the way they explain. Yeah. Well, my neighbor's a nurse, so a retired nurse. So we called her, and I was in the kitchen stress cleaning, and they put it back in, and but that was our first experience with it. And we did have one where it completely shut fully, because they close up really quickly. That's also part of the scary part of it.
Yes, very quickly.
Yeah. So just, and obviously we had friends with trachs and awareness of that, but I was always afraid of that too. If the four families and children that had to go through that, because how quickly that's breathing, it's there's so much stress that are around these, and again, you have to bring all of it with you. You can't just hop in the car and
even if you need to run into the store, you got to take, I had 11 pieces of everything that had to go with me, from the emergency bag to the pulse ox to the apnea to the oxygen to the emergency kit. I mean, literally. And then I've got her, and then, it's just me. And it's like, oh my God, do I really need to go into the store for that badly right now? No.
Well, and actually one of the benefits we did have of COVID, very few that existed, that's when grocery services started to become a thing. And so I didn't have to get her. I never got her out. I am grateful that I had my husband, even though he was working, they never shut down his work. They never shut down my oldest daughter's school. So we still were able to operate relatively normal. But that also meant that I was alone a lot. And, but I just never left the house. We had in-home therapy services. So, on the way home, I would either order, if I did have to do it, I ordered the groceries so I didn't have to get out of the car, So it's like, kid never seen outside the four walls forever. And, in some ways I was okay with it because it was so hard to mobilize, so.
But you can see how much you love her. It's all over your face. And that is so sweet. It's so sweet.
And honestly, I would never, ever change a single moment of this because she is here. I can't imagine life without her. Right. And our family is complete because of her. And there's a lot of challenges that have obviously come through it, but no reality I would have wished any different if it meant that she wasn't here.
You hear these moms all the time, and they don't get it because they're not in our wheelhouse, if you will. But it's like, oh my God, how am I going to get Susie to soccer practice and Bobby to football practice? And I have no time to go get my nails done. And I'm like, I don't even have nails anymore. Are you kidding me? I don't have time to go get my hair done, and I have no time for me. And my maids are coming today, and you just want to lean back and go, are you kidding me?
Well, and I think it's a matter of awareness, right? So, and condition, right? So I've always been a multifaceted type person. I like to do multiple things. It activates me as a person. I couldn't just do one role. As a homemaker and as a mom, I have to, work, and I have to, that's just me. And I had friends that were homemakers and just by trade, which is incredibly precious and wonderful. My mother was a homemaker. It's a hard job, but I just realized like the pace at which those friends function were so different. And they would get really stressed about certain things that we can't come on a play date on Tuesday because we're going on a vacation this weekend. And I'm like, why?
Like, what's a vacation?
What's that? And then two, like, you got time, you should be, but again, I think it's those like cultural awarenesses and like difference on like pacing. We've been conditioned to be like our pace is different,
Absolutely it is.
and our workload tolerance is different. And not that that's a bad thing but just like you're like, why?
Right. It's
why
so
is this
different.
a concern? It is different.
I've heard so many times that the special needs parents are the most productive in the workforce because they know, and they go, and they know how to get things done, and they do it expeditiously. And it's like, okay, I need this by 5. And like 30 minutes later, like, here, it's done, because you
have to do it.
Right. Because we understand that.
Yeah, I look back at, and I'm sure you were like this too, is like before you got used to it too, or more intensive seasons in her care. But early on, I was breastfeeding. So like I said, I had to pump right before which takes like 30 minutes, and then you have to fortify it. Then I remember, and then you have to do that like 20 times a day, right? And I remember looking back and going, I do not how I kept that cycle. Actually, in between my downtime between those cycles were 30 minutes. So I had to go back through that medical cycle over and over and over again throughout the day. And then like changing out all of her equipment, like 6 p.m. You had all these like tasks you had to do. Cleaning. Yeah. Keeping up with like just cleaning of the machines and the, accessories. And I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I kept that cycle up. Obviously got better with time when she got older and not having to pump or like add certain tasks in. But oh man, it was like pretty amazing.
Yeah. I tell my husband now, I look back at when I worked in corporate and I was like, what a piece of cake that was. Like,
I know.
Are you kidding me? Like, it's really, that was nothing, that's crazy that back then we're like, oh, we're so tired from work. And I'm like, I could do that in my sleep now.
Yeah. Well, and it's, it's a journeys that you're on, that you look back and it's a fortifying because you built up skills that
and I wouldn't trade my daughter for the world. Right.
Yeah.
You totally get it. Oh, well, we went totally off subject for everything. I'm going to have you come back. Tell everybody where you are. You have your own podcast.
Yeah.
So it is called
Pro Dignity, No Doubt.
I love that.
Yeah. So a little bit like a really quick recap or overview of what I do. So my career has been in law and public policy on the communication side of global human rights. I did that for over a decade, or have for over a decade. And those are some of the cases that you mentioned at the beginning. But I realized that there's a need within our cultures, or all cultures, is most of the issues we see are because we don't value human life at its foundation. That if we can transform culture in order to value human life at its foundation, then most of those things within culture sort of will disappear, because people value people, they protect people, period.
Right.
So I founded a nonprofit called Dignity Defense Institute, and you can find it at dignitydefense.org. And our podcast, Pro Dignity, No Doubt, it ties into that. And a lot of our stories are very intense stories of struggle that were then transformed into beautiful purpose. So we've had everything from domestic abuse, very intense stories around that. We've had a woman that was actually in slave camps in Cambodia. We've had some really, really interesting stories of resilience. So if you want to find that, we're on pretty much every streaming service for podcasts. Yeah, so that's what I do aside from advocating for my sweet little one too. So
There you go. Well, I hope that we stay in touch. And if I can help with the ASL, I'm so happy
oh
to do
yes.
it. I would love to. I would love to
Yes.
work with little cutie pie and you. It
Yeah.
would be so much fun because it's personalized and it's a bond.
Yeah.
It truly is bonding between you and your daughter. It really is.
Well, and it's been a beautiful path even on my own. I think one of our therapists said, you realize like why she never wants to leave you. It's because you're the only one that can talk to her.
Well, we also
And
can incorporate your older daughter and your
yeah,
husband too.
yeah. So I've been teaching them as well. Like, obviously but she's starting to form sentences. She's become really activated in it. So yeah, I would love any help.
Absolutely. And then I actually also asked the parents to let me have just the children by themselves. And so
Yeah.
they bond because they bond that way because I specifically work with them on things that they could bond together about. Like, I'm not going to teach one of them, change, diaper, potty, whatever. When
Yeah,
I
yeah,
be
yeah.
like, let's play. And I teach
Yeah.
them signs that they could do together, things that they can do together and
That
bond.
makes sense. Yes. I
Yeah, and
love
it's
it.
so much fun. And then the family gets tighter unit because they communicate and the frustration's not there. And it's
Oh
a
yeah.
beautiful thing to watch. It really is. So please, when we're done with this, um, let me know and I'll help any way that I can.
Oh, good. Thank you so
Of
much. And thanks for
course.
having me on. This was
Abs-
wonderful to chat today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. I truly appreciate it. And I look forward to talking with you soon.
All
Thank
right.
you.